shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and hope.
I feel like I went through all of those things. My name is Ellie.
And my name is Ross.
Welcome to our podcast, In Real Life, where we dive deep into life, relationships, and real-world topics.
We promise laughter, tears, and jaw-dropping moments. Well, I don't want to promise it. But
So get ready, because this is what it means for us to live in real life. This series will touch on subjects related to suicide and other challenging life experiences. If you're struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, you can reach out to Lifeline Australia at 13 11 14 or reach their website at www.lifeline.org.au. Okay, guys, welcome back to In Real Life.
hey,
Ellie and Ross and Daisy. Look at Daisy sitting over there like a little princess. You're so cute. You are a little princess. She's just giving herself a bath like a little bird right now. But what are we talking about today?
talking about grief.
Yep. We're back on the we're back on the dads. Our dads are dead.
Yep.
Death.
Dead dads.
Everything.
Dead Dads Club.
But we're talking about a bit about grief and also
How we handled it, how we processed it.
Yeah.
Working with Albert, we had a fantastic counsellor
Yep.
for a number of years who helped understand your dad's situation. And
Yeah.
then my dad decided to die as well. No, didn't really decide to die. But yeah, helped us process that. And then there were some interesting things that happened when my dad died as well. Very different circumstances. Also, how the death of your dad affected us as a couple. You've
Yeah.
obviously shared a little bit about, the story of how your dad passed away.
Yeah.
And today we'll look into how it impacted us, how we handled it, how we still handle it to this day.
Yeah. Because it's not just something that you get over, right? It's something that you live with and that you constantly have to deal with. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it affects your day, and then one day it just hits you like a train and you just feel the grief all over again.
So what stages of grief did, because I don't think Albert worked through with me, different stages of grief.
Diving right into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go, mofo.
Well, yeah, when I first sat down with him, he kind of just gave me a rundown of like how the stages of grief work. I've actually written it down so I don't actually forget. But we've got
Shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and hope.
So I think the one thing that I feel like I went through all of those things, definitely.
Well, I mean, isn't that the whole thing?
But it's
you go through them,
to
but
expect,
at different levels.
There's different levels to them. Some people don't experience all of them. It just depends on how I think the person passes as well, and your personality type too. I think that definitely gets factored in. But they're the most common things that people go through when they go through loss. And I think the one that I really struggled with was definitely the sadness and the depression, sure. I remember there was like so many instances where like I was, and this is sort of like after your dad was diagnosed with cancer and you flew back to Australia. But I remember there was instances where I'd be like lying in bed alone and just crying until 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And just I kind of see grief a little bit like this. It's kind of like you start off in the bottom of a well, right? Like an empty, dark well. And you sort of sit there and you try and like you figure out like, okay, like how am I going to get out of here? Like what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to climb up the well. So you climb up, you slip, you fall down to the bottom. You keep climbing, you climb. You get like halfway, you slip, you fall a little bit down, but you catch yourself, and then you keep climbing to the top. You might fall a little bit, and then when you get to the top, you feel like you're about to pull your last leg out of the well, and you fall all the way back down again. That's my experience with how I felt like I was going through grief. Because, like I said earlier, it's one of those things where one day, like I'm almost 10 years after my dad has died. And some days I will wake up and I just feel the sadness so deeply. like it was yesterday. And time runs so differently when you lose someone. It's almost like it feels like it's yesterday, but it also feels like it was like 20 years ago sometimes.
Yeah.
Time just moves so differently when you're dealing with death and grief and loss. I think the sadness and the depression was the one thing that I really struggled with because I'd kind of never really had like something really challenging or traumatic ever happened to me growing up as a kid. Like I had a really good childhood.
Yeah.
You know, I did lose people that I loved very much over the years, but never something like I had to deal with like this. So I was really navigating it for the first time. I wasn't taking antidepressants. I had my medication, my Xanax and my anti-anxiety medication.
Wasn't on that for long. How long were you on that for?
A couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also, during that time, I wasn't drinking either. I had 2 experiences, which we'll talk about, where I did drink. First time it was like I couldn't stop crying. The second time was a little bit different. But during that time, I just tried to stay off alcohol and I really tried to be like responsible and like go through and feel all the things that I was feeling, which is important for grief. But yeah, that's probably the one thing that I really struggle with more than anything was that grief and that sadness.
And Albert helped you.
Yeah,
in what
helped. I think the one thing that I learned was you have to let it out, right? So you can't keep grief up inside of you because it ends up coming out either which way. You know, that's like you're crying, like you get angry, whatever it is, it comes out. So you just have to like go with how you're feeling, right?
It seems like you deal with grief once a month.
But
and
you just got
to be the same time every month.
But he helped me let it out. And for anyone who's listening as well, counselling was the most amazing experience I could ever recommend. You don't have to lose someone to be able to benefit from counselling. That's something that I actually realised very, very quickly when I started seeing Albert. It just did so much for me. It was such a positive experience, and it helped me understand and regulate how I was feeling, and just such a great insight, you know, and it just helped me deal with things so much better because I was like, am I doing this the right way? And like he'd give me like advice and opinions and all these kinds of things, but he was really kind of guiding me through that experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, grief is just such a seriously profound thing that it just changes people so much.
So you so there was an experience where you had medication for a little while. That's probably a good thing that you did, right?
Yeah, I agree with it, using it in the right way. Some people abuse it, but I think sometimes it's like it was really good for me because I did have times where I had such an overwhelming feeling of like sadness or anxiety or stress or I just felt so shit. I was just like, I physically can't get myself out of this. Like I would go and exercise. I would go and do like all the good things, but sometimes that shit just didn't work. And then I would be able to, you know, take my anxiety medication, or whether it was Xanax to help me sleep because I was just awake all night, just in tears. Like it was just such a hard thing to navigate, and it really did help me because I couldn't help myself at several points during that experience. So that was a really positive thing for me. But the one thing
until it wasn't.
Yeah. Till the one experience where I actually stopped taking it. So the first time I got really drunk was at a friend's party, which was maybe like a couple of months after Dad died. And I was like, yeah, like, okay, I'm going to have a couple of drinks. Like, it's a good environment. It's fun. Like, and then one of our friends pulled me aside towards the end of the night, and he was just like
I think it was 4th of July, right?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
4th of July
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Party, yeah.
And he was such a like Papa Bear kind of like character.
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside and he was just like, how are you doing? And I was like, yeah, like I'm good, you know? And then he's like, no, but really, like, and I think he put his hand on my shoulder And he was like, no, but really, like, how are you doing? And I literally burst into tears. And because I was a bit drunk, I physically couldn't stop crying. So we had to go home. Pretty sure I was wearing one shoe walking through
There's
the
that
lobby.
one shoe that you brought over.
Walking through. No, this is in Vegas. Walking through the lobby because my shoe broke. So I was wearing one shoe. I was so drunk. I just remember walking through the lobby so embarrassed.
I don't think you were about. Weren't even caring about anything.
Yeah, but I was just so sad, and I was like, fuck, okay, I'm not going to drink again. So for months I didn't touch alcohol. I just stayed away from it just so I can, not feel that feeling again. And then a couple of months went by. We all went to Vegas, and I was like, oh, I really feel
It was
like
the next month. So that was July, and then in August, late August.
okay.
So actually no, big July 4th, and then end of August. So it was nearly 2 months.
Yeah.
6 weeks.
So I was like, oh, I want to go out and have fun. Like I feel like I haven't gone out and had a good time in such a long time. So we went to Vegas. You had you were there with the boys.
Yeah,
and
a bit of a boys' trip.
Yeah, a bit of a boys' trip.
From
You guys
Australia.
went.
Yep.
Yeah, the boys came up from Australia, and you guys went to dinner and stuff. And a girlfriend and I went and saw a show, and then we went to a club, and we had security there with us to make sure we didn't get roofied. And, it was just because it was just us two, and we were in the club, and we just had people taking care of us more than anything. Because I also didn't know how I was going to be. I could have just been a fucking mess. But I was having a really fun night, really fun time. And then I think it was maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back up to the room. So our security guard walked us up to the room, made sure I had water. He's like, are you okay? Are you all good? And I'm like, yeah, I'm all good. Fine. And then he left. You were still out. And I just got into the room, super quiet. TV wasn't on. I was just sort of sitting there, and I just started thinking about Dad because I was fucking absolutely belligerent. I was so drunk. And I just started getting so upset. And I just started bawling my eyes out. I was a fucking mess, just crying. And I was just like, oh, fuck, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I really don't. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take some Xanax. I'm just going to go sleep, and I'll be fine in the morning. So I took 2 bars. I was only supposed to take 1. And I was really fucking drunk. I then was I'm still full hair and makeup in my dress outfit. So I'm getting undressed. I'm still crying. I'm still really upset. Obviously hadn't kicked in. And I was like, what'll make me feel better? And not in my frame of mind at all. And I'm first and foremost someone who's really responsible and really safe. I don't do silly things, but this is one of those things, one of those examples as to what grief can do to someone, even if they're the most responsible and safe person. You make stupid fucking decisions. So in that instance, I was like, what's going to make me feel better? I'm going to have a bath. So I started running the bath. I got in the bath, and I'm
Fuck, you love your baths.
I know I do.
You have more baths than you brush your teeth. And you brush your teeth a lot.
I don't have 2 baths a day, 3 baths a day. If I could, I would. But yeah, I do love a bath, and it's something that actually genuinely helps me relax. So I was in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm going to feel so much better. I get into the bath, and I just sort of was sitting there just thinking about it. I was still crying. I just couldn't stop because I was so drunk. I feel like a lot of girls can relate to this, even if they're not going through the death of someone. They just get upset about something and just keep fucking crying. But the next thing I knew, and the bath was still running, I wake up to you and the boys bashing on the door. The bath water was literally up to my chin. It hadn't woken me up. It was the bashing on the door that was the thing that actually brought me out of it. And I think you guys were bashing on that door for quite some time. And when I'd sort of came to, I kind of was what the fuck? Where am I? And then I realized that I was in the bath water's still running, and I was like, fuck. And then, this is actually so hard to talk about. I'd realized like what I'd done, and you guys, your timing was impeccable, by the way. But I was so, like, the Xanax had kicked in so much that when I'd woken up, like, my body felt so heavy. And I was so drunk that, like, I was just like, oh my God, like, I had to pull myself, like, almost like how do you even maneuver getting out of a bath? Like, just trying to climb over it, slide over the edge of the bath. And I fell on the, like, floor mat on the floor. I remember just, like, laying there and I'm like, what the fuck is, like, what is wrong with me? Like, what have I just done? And I, like, pulled up the bath mat and I pretty much crawled to the front door, sort of stood up, and I'm holding the bath mat because I could hear you're there with other people as well. And I felt like I could barely even open my eyes. But I opened the door and you're standing there and you saw me straight away and you were like, fuck, like something's happened. Something's wrong. Because at that point I was like hysterically crying, holding half a bath mat up over my naked body. And you sent everyone away. And, like, in that moment, I just realized, like, that I had made such a poor judgment decision that you could have literally come home or come back to the room to my fucking dead body in the bath. And that would have literally ruined your life. All because, and that's not what I wanted. Like, that's not why I did that. Like, it was a poor judgment call. And I felt so ashamed, guilty, like, embarrassed at what I'd done. I'd just gotten so upset. I couldn't even speak. We were like sitting there and you're like, do I need to call you an ambulance? Like, what's wrong with you? And I just kept thinking in my head, I was like, oh, I could have, like, completely fucked his life. I could have killed myself, but I wouldn't have been here to pick up the pieces. I would be dead. I wouldn't even fucking know. I would have just been sitting, like I would have just gone to sleep and fucking drowned. But you would have had to have been there to sit there and pick up the pieces and go through what, like, really I had gone through. And I know the impact that it had on me, and to think that I was capable of doing that to you through making such a fucked up, stupid decision broke my heart. And I just felt really embarrassed. And I didn't even tell you. Like, I think I told Albert first at a counselling session when I got home, and I was like, hey, look, like, this happened, and Ross doesn't know. I didn't tell him. I feel really embarrassed and ashamed. And he was like, you know, he's like, people make mistakes, and that's just part of the grieving process. Sometimes people make stupid decisions. And he's like, I think that you should tell him. And I was like, but I feel so bad. Like, I feel like he'll look at me differently. And then when I told you, it just, like, lifted something off my shoulders that I felt like I was carrying with me. And, like, and you were there to support me, and you were so understanding. But I still to this day feel so guilty that I could have done that to you. And I still feel that shame. I feel so stupid that I could do that to myself and make such a bad judgment call that could have changed the trajectory of my life, your life, people around me who actually care about me. But yeah, that like it's just goes back to the fact that grief just makes you do and feel and think so many different things that you never thought you were capable of ever thinking or doing. And that's when I actually stopped taking that prescription medication, because I felt like, okay, well, if I can't use it in the way that it's supposed to be used and I can't trust myself to do that, then I just won't take it. So that was a good thing. And like, that's something I spoke about with Albert. He's like, do you feel like you need it? And I was like, well, no, like I feel like I can probably get through without it, and I can work on the things that I need to, because I feel like sometimes I take it to just block myself from feeling things. And he was such a huge, what's the word I'm looking for?
Advocate? I think he was an advocate for feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
He didn't say, take something to not feel something. He was
he's
an
like,
advocate for if you're feeling it, there's a reason, and you need to understand the reason and then process it, accept it, explore it.
Yeah, because I didn't want to, throughout my life, have these instances of like not dealing with things, and then when I'd get drunk, like I would go into a fucking absolute spiral, which, I don't anymore, which is amazing. But that's because I've dealt with how I feel. I've worked through it, and I worked so hard. I've worked so hard to get to like a really good place of like self-awareness and like understanding and knowing that when I feel something, if I feel a certain way, like, oh, I should speak to someone, like I should speak to you, I should go and speak to Albert, or like whatever it is. Like there's so many, like as soon as I feel those things coming on, I'm like, okay, like this is what I know I need to do to get through it. But that was probably one of the most like life-altering, changing experiences through dealing with grief that changed me as a person, changed my perspective on things, and just like, changed me as a person.
So we did individual counselling and then couples counselling. What would you say is the difference between the two? Why do we need to do it together? Why do we need to do it separately?
Well, I think the singular, like the individual counselling, you can say things that you might not necessarily say in front of your partner. You can just share how you feel without feeling like you're gonna offend anyone, or you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things, just having a one-on-one conversation that you don't need to factor anything else in when you're talking.
Yeah.
You can just talk. I think the counselling on our side of things was so great, because we also didn't I didn't want you to become a parent to me in that experience, which could have definitely happened.
I definitely felt like I did for a period of time.
Yeah, and I didn't want that. So he really helped us work through that experience of like, okay, like how can you be there for Ellie as a partner? And then like if you would say certain things, he'd be like, okay, well, like maybe next time, like you could do this, or you guys could do this as a couple, or like try this exercise, or like, he was just so helpful in like helping us navigate that together, because you do need to navigate grief individually, right? But you also need you need to learn how to be there for each other in the right way, especially for your personality type, your love language, all of those things. It's like, I feel like it's different for everyone. But how do you feel like, how do you feel like it was beneficial for the both of us to be going through counselling? Because like, you felt like you were a parent to me for a while. In what way? Explain how you felt like you were a parent.
Well, it was more so there to, be as a partner. I've always felt like I'm there to protect you and, give you love, but it was just in a different way. I think, as a partner, there's that intimate connection, obviously.
Yeah.
But a lot of that intimacy, I think, is traded for the comfort you want to provide. It felt like that for me anyway. Like, yeah, you go from like I went from looking at you as, you know, this person that, you know, you would wear something and I'll be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, she looks good. You know, and you know, and then those thoughts were like gone for a period of time.
Yeah.
It was like I looked at you in a different way because I almost thought like, oh, hang on, I need to make sure she's okay. I need to make sure she's like processing and dealing. So it just changed those things, you know, it sort of removed a bit of that desire for intimacy and it shifted it to almost like a providing or a caring or a nurturing
Yeah.
space rather than, I don't know. It's a different, it's not a love thing because the love's still there. It's probably the way that, you know, I viewed you was different. And he helped me understand that. I think he helped me accept that maybe that's just what will happen for the next few months and maybe it's longer, but, you know, and he was such a dude. He was so chill. He was the dude. He would sit there and he'd just be like,
yeah, man,
what about this? And you just
he actually was like, yeah, man.
He was so
he was so funny. I fucking love Albert.
And he would
Albert, if you're listening, we fucking love you.
But he would just be raw and I can't remember the exact words, but it was like but he would say I'm pretty sure he would say so, and I don't want to misquote him, but I'm sure there was like client confidentiality. He couldn't share it anyway. But I think it was something like, you know, it needs to, like, you know, gone are the days of thinking about fucking. You know, it was like, you know, you're just not going to be there for a while.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah.
He was actually totally, his analogies were actually so funny.
Like, and you know, that stuff will come back, but that's not what she needs, and that's not what you need. That's not where you're at right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did feel like I became a parent to you for a little while, maybe a few months, maybe 6 months.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like we were navigating something that was so traumatic, and then also those things outside that where you were like you just wanted me to be okay. And safe, and especially too since after 6 months, like we had 6 months of being together, and then you get a call from your dad saying he had cancer. Actually, no, it wasn't that.
No, it wasn't that.
It was your dad going into emergency surgery.
Yeah, on New Year's. No, it was around New Year's or around...
It was just after New Year's.
Yeah.
Because we were there for Christmas and New Year's and he was sick, do you remember?
Yeah, he passed out at New Year's, just passed out while we were out at what we call the hut, whereas, you know, we hung out and had drinks and played poker and whatever. But yeah, he passed out. And even an ambulance was called. We all felt like shit because we were calling an ambulance out. I think it was on New Year's. It was New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah. And we were in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah. And then I think their conclusion was literally like, oh, he's just had a little bit too much to smoke.
And your mum was so pissed off.
Yeah. So we're like, oh, okay, well, I don't know about that, but all right, you're the ambulance guys. So anyway, and then a few days later, he ended up pretty much like collapsing on the floor in excruciating pain, and I had to drive him to the emergency hospital, which was like 45 minutes away. And then we found out that he had a 40 millimeter tumor in his bowel cut out, which was basically completely blocking him up.
Yeah.
That's how I found out.
So we'll come back. We'll circle back to that story and experience. But like, what was your childhood like with your dad? Do you have any like fond memories?
Yeah.
With him that you can like think back to, or?
Yeah, sure. There's plenty. I remember we had a stand-up jet ski, but my dad's an immigrant as well. Well, actually, no, he was born in Australia, but my grandparents from the UK, they came over. I think they called them like 1 pound poms or something. Like,
what does that mean? 1 pound poms?
There was like this immigration scheme or whatever where it encouraged POMs to come over and you just buy a ticket, you get over here, they put you up and, you know, you start living here. So they moved to Adelaide. I think they were there for like 2 years and Dad was born there. And then they moved back to the UK. So he was born here, but he grew up his entire life in the UK.
Yeah.
So we moved over here when I was like 2 years old. So I obviously didn't have anything to do with the move. But my parents landed here with pretty much nothing, some money, a couple of kids, no real contacts either. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't, there was literally nothing like that. There wasn't even mobile phones. It's 1988. So landed here, 2 kids, really knew nothing, decided that Brisbane was the place to be. I think maybe the Brisbane Expo, the World Expo that was in Brisbane had something to do with that maybe. And then sort of worked and much the same as your dad, ended up working his ass off and learning different things. And I don't know if it's that sort of like immigrant, even though it wasn't an immigrant, but it sort of was. I feel like people who move to another place are a little bit more hungry because I'm moving away from something and I'm going here for opportunity.
Moving away from something and moving toward something better.
Yeah. And I have, a great experience from, like the early 90s when I was, 6 or 7, where he got a stand-up jet ski. And I think I was literally like, I want to say like 6 or 7 years old. And the SeaWorld down here, there's a little, not a canal, but the spit, the seawater, the seawater, of course it's seawater. But yeah, I used to ride the stand-up jet ski by myself as like a fucking 6 or 7-year-old. This whatever horsepower thing.
People had so much trust in kids.
Oh, you
in
do
those
whatever.
days.
Yeah.
Drive the boat. Do whatever.
So I remember that sort of stuff was really cool. I remember this one day, I don't know why or what, but Dad was like, it's an anything day. You can do whatever you want to do. And it was just me and him. And we drive down to the coast, and I remember the first thing that we did was we went for a flight in a Tiger Moth plane, like an open air, like World War II style plane.
That's so fucking cool.
It was cool. And then right next to there,
I didn't even know that.
Right next to there was a go-kart track. So we spent I don't know, what felt like an hour, but it was probably only like 2 10-minute sessions. Then we went to SeaWorld and we were only there for like 2 hours. And then we went back to the go-kart track and did that. And then I think we've only got a takeaway. It was Red Rooster, I can't remember the name. It was we got like one like 2 or 3 times a week. It was bad. But yeah, so like that some fond memories of him. We also had a bit of an interesting relationship as I became an adult. Yeah,
you guys have had kind of a bit of a rocky relationship over the time that, like, when I came on the scene with you, almost 16 years ago.
Yeah,
just crazy. That's almost 2 decades. But
feel old?
Yeah, no, I don't. You're only as old as you feel, or the woman that you feel. And I'm not old, so you're not old. But yeah, you guys had a pretty rocky relationship over the time, like when you and I had started dating.
I think that stemmed from in the 90s. My dad had a business, and he built it up, and it was pretty successful. And lost everything. I remember my parents had a few investment properties. They never owned the house that they lived in. It was rented, and they had like investment properties and rented them out or whatever. Yeah. As a kid, I remember going from having this, Dad having the nice red shiny car. It wasn't this car here, the Ferrari F50, but it was a Honda NSX, which
my dad used to compliment your dad on when we lived on the same street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we lived up the road, didn't know of each other. Yeah. But because we're on acreage, it's like miles up the road.
Yeah, it's a long way.
But yeah, so, I went from like a young kid for like having parents and I was like year 4, year 5, parents like doing pretty well for themselves, to then literally selling the cars, selling the houses, selling everything. They even sold their wedding rings.
Yeah.
Literally everything sort of changing overnight. Dad going bankrupt. And as a kid, it's very hard to explain to your mates, oh, your dad had the super nice red fast car and now you're driving in a car that's like my shoe's worth more than. As a kid, it's really hard. Like I didn't know how to sort of fully understand it or process it. And I think that scarred him. I think he ended up like not trusting anyone or letting anyone in, really struggled letting anyone in. forever, probably like up until the day that he died, to be honest. I think he
Yeah.
really struggled with those things that happened. So, and I think that impacted our relationship as I became an adult. You know, there were instances where, you know, when I left school, I bought my first business off of him, which was a franchise. You know, just like anyone else came along, I had to pay the same as what anyone else did. Fortunately, he did let me finance half of it, which was nice. But, you know, if I missed a payment one week, it was like double the next week. It wasn't like the bank just giving you a warning. It was like, it's $150 a week. And next week, if you miss it, it's like $300.
He was going to teach you a lesson.
Yeah. And look, at the time, I fucking hated it.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, you're just like, oh, you know, you're doing okay. And this is like they were starting to build back up and you know, they'd struggled for a good 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
Like very much struggled. I remember opening like the fridge and it's like, I was embarrassed when I had friends over sometimes because I didn't know what we were going to eat. Like we never went hungry. We always had breakfast, lunch and dinner. But unlike going to your friend's house and they had like snacks and, you know, chips and dip and chocolate and like we didn't, you know, we had food to eat and that was it.
I remember things had gotten pretty bad where your dad couldn't even get a rental property and he ended up, because his first name and his last name are the same as his dad's.
Yeah. So he's a junior. He's a junior and a senior.
Yeah. So
so we got a rental property. This was like we went from one house and then we moved into my grandparents' house, kicked them out of their house. We stayed there. And then we thought we'd found a rental and he put his dad's name down as a rental. We got into this house and 10 days later, once everything was unpacked, they asked us to leave. And fortunately, we found this really nice guy who privately let the home to us. And we were there for like 5 years, which sort of helped mum and dad get back on their feet, which is cool. But yeah, we you know, moved around a lot and, you know, friends lent mum and dad their car. We were a single car family for such a long time, even with so many kids. But, you know, mum and dad stuck together and, you know, they persevered and pushed through. But, you know, those things scarred my dad. And it definitely sort of made a lot of, you know, it shaped the relationship that I had with him. So, you know, growing up, it was, like I said, bought my first business from him, which was a car cleaning business, you know, and ran that for a couple of years, sold that to the guy that worked for me. And then I bought another business of him, which was a lawn mowing business. And then at the time I started a personal training business with my partner, girlfriend at the time. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but for whatever, like I think we split up and then my dad got involved in that business. It's like, hang on, that's my ex-girlfriend. It was really fucking weird. But there was just a few
crazy.
There was a few instances and there was just a few things that happened. It was just like, you know, where I felt like, you know, my dad chose this like the business over me. And maybe it was, I don't know. But yeah, we definitely had an up and down relationship. It was only until probably like the last like 3 years of his life that we started to have like a real friendly relationship where we could just sit and hang and, you know, have a drink and yeah, that was only really the last like few years really.
Because you guys didn't talk for like maybe like 2 years.
Yeah, there was like a 2 year period.
There was a 2 year period
yeah.
where you guys just didn't even, your mum, you weren't allowed to go over and see your brothers. They were quite young at the time. But yeah, you were banned from coming over to the house. Period.
Yeah.
And you didn't speak to anyone for 2 years. How did that make you feel when you guys were going through that? And how did you, like when you guys resolved that, I remember I was sitting there. We're all sitting there in the pool room. It was awkward as fuck because I was just there for moral support.
Oh, look, I don't think it may have appeared to have been resolved, but I think, you know, for me, that sat with me. I don't think it ever disappeared. I was like, why would you do that? Like, because it was over something where I stood my ground on something and I didn't agree with something that was being done.
Yeah.
And I sort of called it out. And, you know, looking back, it's like these are some of the things, the experiences that sort of shaped, you know, this child-free decision, that we've just spoken about, I guess, as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, that was frustrating. So going through, and then fast forward, your dad passing away 6 months later, my dad getting diagnosed because we rushed him to a hospital, and I had all these feelings of I was angry because he didn't look after his health. I was frustrated because the doctors said stuff like changing your diet would have no impact on whether you're going to get better or worse, which is crazy to me.
So going back to like when you obviously found out, we were in America, and actually no, were you in Australia when your dad went into emergency surgery?
Yeah, because I drove him to the
Yeah.
emergency
Yeah.
surgery,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah, it's going back a few years ago. My memory's not that great.
I think you've blocked certain things
I
out.
have definitely blocked a lot of
Yeah.
stuff out.
Like, I don't have space for this anymore.
Yeah, so I was in America, and I just remember you saying like we're driving Dad to the ER because we don't know what's wrong with him. So obviously, like when you found out that they basically cut out a tumor that was blocking his whole system, what was running through your head? How did you feel in that moment when they told you that was the diagnosis that your dad had cancer?
Not. It was sort of like bit of disbelief. You don't believe that shit until it happens to you. But probably a lot of frustration and anger directed towards him, to be honest, because he wasn't an obese guy. He was a bit overweight. Mainly that was because he had beer on tap at his house.
He didn't exercise. That didn't help.
No, he didn't exercise. Didn't move. I don't think he had particularly the best diet.
Yeah.
And I'm no model citizen at all, but like he just didn't move. He never went to the doctor. He had a genuine like phobia or fear of needles, and doctors. Didn't go to the dentist. Like he didn't just go because it wasn't a lazy thing for him. He genuinely, like when we took him in for the emergency, in emergency when he was in so much pain, we took him into one of the rooms. It was like this with the bed or whatever, and sat down. And then he even said when the doctor came in, he was like, "Look, don't you fucking touch me. Don't you fucking touch me." And I'm pretty sure he said, "You bunch of cunts.
Oh,
Don't you
wasn't
touch
he like
me."
fighting them?
Yeah, he was trying to.
He was trying to fight him. Your dad loved to try and fight people though.
But I think me and my mum had to say, look, he has some sort of a phobia. Like you bring out a needle, you show him blood, and like he will resist it so hard. So he started off by apologizing and like saying, I need help, but I can't do this. So it was hard seeing him like,
they just ended up putting him under, right? Like just knocked him out.
But it was a battle to
put him out.
Yeah.
So in that moment, did you guys obviously didn't know that he had cancer then?
No. Didn't know what it was.
So he obviously had a surgery. Doctor came in the room. What did they tell you the extent of his actual like illness was when they came in?
Not much. It was almost like further tests to be done. Obviously they found, they had this it was I think about like that big, 4 centimeters, like golf ball tumor cut out. Obviously tumor means that there's more than likely it's in other places, but then the whole like test process started from there. And it wasn't, I don't think it was like two and a bit weeks, maybe 3 weeks, until they found out, got test results back, and by that time Dad had sort of was healing at home.
But they just sort of thought like, oh, we cut it out, we cut the tumor out, we'll do some scans, like see where else it's spread to.
Yeah,
if it has.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when your dad found out like that he had cancer, it had spread everywhere.
Yeah.
What was the time that they sort of gave him to live at that point when they diagnosed him?
Well, it sort of happened in stages, to be honest. And I don't know whether it was because me and my brothers weren't being told everything by my mum and dad. Fortunately, I was there when me and my mum picked up that first scan, and it's sort of like, I don't know if doctors are purposely cryptic,
They are, absolutely.
It's like, no, you got to take that to another doctor, so you got to pay them, so then they can read it and tell you exactly what it says in the paper here. But
Basically, I can't read it, but it looks bad.
yeah, that was pretty much. I mean, that was seemed pretty clear that it wasn't good, and it was in multiple places throughout his body. So
Well, yeah, because you guys had the scan, so you could kind of like.
we couldn't really make it. It wasn't like, it wasn't a TV show. It wasn't like it wasn't as dramatic as that. It was a lot of confusion, just not knowing what's going on, how serious things were.
Yeah.
But by the time, we sort of knew that like things weren't good, I reckon it was like 3 months in. So it was like New Year's-ish emergency. And then like 3 months later, then we sort of knew that Dad was on a path of trying to beat a stage 4 cancer with like, there was like a 3% chance that he would see out 2 years, basically. They were sort of some of the stats or the odds that he was given.
How did that make you feel when you heard that?
I don't know. I don't think I ever accepted it, to be honest. I don't think I ever like sat down and was just thinking, wow, I mean, Dad could be dead in 2 years. I don't think I really reflected on it like that.
Did you kind of not believe it? Or was it like, you're like, oh, I feel like Dad would be, were you a bit like, you don't want to say doctors are wrong or over dramatic or they're trying to just like prepare people for the worst, but did you kind of feel like, oh yeah, if Dad does all the right things and chemo, like you hold out hope obviously for someone to be able to pull through that?
No, I don't think it was any. I don't know. It was you don't know what you don't know. I was like, I definitely I think I failed to believe the fact that he was going to be dead in like 2 years. I don't think I ever just thought, oh, he's not going to be here, and that got me sad or upset. Like, never. I don't think it ever once that I thought like that. Maybe it was because I was and I'm optimistic and just thought, he'll beat this, or that's just the thing that doctors say. I never really thought, oh, well, this is it. And I didn't start like counting down the days sort of thing. I never looked at it like that.
What were some of the key things that kind of stood out to you through your dad's illness?
In what way?
The key stages that he went through that stood out to you or that you went through that you guys experienced?
Obviously, I mean, there was that first surgery. There was in the diagnosis of cancer. Then there was the part where you go through, chemo and the feedback that that's not working. And then you start to explore what do they call experimental drugs. And I'm not talking like psychedelics. I'm talking like, the hospitals are doing, this new test and they're wanting to have patients on it. And at that point, you're starting to think, oh, fuck, okay, well, they've run out of options and now they're trying this new stuff because obviously this other stuff doesn't and didn't work.
Yeah.
So trying to, that was definitely a say. And then to get into the point where he decided not to trial these drugs and almost accepted that, okay, well, this is kind of it. To then having the nurse come to our house. Is that hospice? Is that what that's called? Hospice care? Where they allow you to sort of die in your home.
Oh, no, palliative care.
Palliative care.
Hospice, I think, is old people.
No, hospice is you go to the place, right? A hospice?
I don't know.
You go to and like you die there.
We haven't been there yet, so we don't know. Yeah. But palliative care is they come and take care of you when you're
palliative. Yeah. So the nurses come. Yeah, that was a different point. Even at that point, and at that point, stuff like marijuana and cannabis oil, that wasn't legal here in Australia. Now it is through prescription or whatever. But even she suggested for me to drive to this place called Nimbin. And if you live in Australia, it's near Byron Bay. And it's got like I can't remember, it's like actually, no, I won't say it. But there's a place called Nimbin and like there's a main street and then there's actually like so like a bookstore, but they don't just sell books. But she was like, look, well, if you would like for him to enjoy the last, what he's got left, get him some cannabis oil. It's really good. Unfortunately, having lived in America for a long time, I had been exposed to cannabis, so I wasn't.
You weren't like, my dad's not doing that.
Yeah, because we did it with him quite a bit. And in, the weeks leading up to him passing away, I think, there was some really nice moments because it actually took away pain, gave him some appetite. It was actually really nice. But yeah, so, that was another stage. I was like, even this nurse is telling me to go get this thing, which is illegal, but it's cannabis oil.
Yeah. I think that was the most helpful thing, palliative care, actually.
Oh, look, it was helpful, but it also felt a little bit like they didn't tell us exactly. Like,
yeah, that was the most helpful thing that they did, because they didn't tell you like what was going to happen or prepare you for.
I would have liked to have known,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
I would have liked them to be like, hey, you know what? This is what I do day in, day out. And what I'm seeing right now is your dad probably has 5, maybe 10 days left to live. I'm being brutally honest with you.
Yeah.
But instead, they're like, they're a bit more, he's going okay. We'll see how he is the next day. And see, and look, I'm not saying they did a bad job, but the way I would have liked to have known was, hey,
Transparency.
yeah. And I get maybe people would react bad if they were told that, then it maybe send them into like a spiral or whatever. So I get why they probably wouldn't share that.
But I guess on more of a prepared thing.
I would have liked to have been more prepared. I'm kind of glad that maybe, my mum or whatever wasn't, because it just meant you were just present in the moment and enjoying the time rather than thinking, oh, I'm counting down the hours or days or whatever. So
because there was a situation where, and please tell me to stop talking if you don't want to talk about this, but there was a situation where they'd actually administered a drug to him before he'd given you all of the passwords and information for you guys to be able to have access to everything you needed to have access to before he passed.
Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, Dad looked after Mum and, the boys that were still at home. Me and my older brother would have been at home for ages. So, yeah, my mum didn't even know how to pay her phone bill, for example. He looked after paying the mortgage and the car payments.
He looked after all the money.
Yeah. But Mum didn't have access to any of it either.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, I mean, there was when palliative care and they started to administer these drugs, which sort of, I guess, really just pass you the fuck out so you're not experiencing pain. And they'd done this before Mum was able to get access to any bank information, any passwords of any kind, email passwords, Foxtel passwords.
Literally any information.
Anything, even like the PIN code for resetting the gate to get in the house. Like, she had none of it.
And he had it all written down, but he was very apprehensive to give it to anyone because he had experiences that, you've previously touched on, that he was like very protective of those things.
Yeah, and I think the drugs on top of that then just turned him into, I think it just fucked with his head.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a part of this when they got the passwords out of him, but it almost turned into like an argument with my younger brothers and him, saying, hey, you need to give Mum this information. Like, you need to share her this stuff. And, he was going off and saying stuff like, oh, you just want my money. And this is like, when I heard that conversation had taken place, I was like, surely he's fucked up, because maybe someone outside of the family would say that, but this was like his sons that were still living in the house and they all had a very good and close relationship. He was saying this shit.
Yeah.
So it was, to see him sort of be in that way was not nice. It was, but I don't know how you end up feeling or what you're like when you're preparing to die.
And on drugs.
Yeah. Well,
So
I've been on drugs before, so I know what that's like, but I don't know.
not palliative care drugs.
No, that'd be a trip. Yeah.
So how did your role as a support system evolve during that time?
Well, it evolved almost instantly, or like overnight when Dad died.
Yeah.
I think there was a day to sort of. No, look, honestly, the ball just started rolling. Our dad just died at a very similar sort of time. My dad was very early in the morning. It was like 4:30 or something in the morning, 5 in the morning. He died.
So tell me a little bit more about that before we go into that support system while we're mentioning it.
Oh, we were staying at Mum and Dad's house while that happened. We were staying in the next room, and then Mum.
We were very aware that it was more than likely happening over. It was like a 48-hour period, right?
Yeah. And then at like 2 or 3 in the morning, heard a massive banging on the on the wall. And then I went in and Mum was like, oh, he gasped and he said, I think he said, help me, and like reached out or something. She gave him some more drugs, as like was instructed by the palliative people.
They weren't great with that either, were they?
No, I don't. Yeah, no.
Because your mum, like we didn't. We went in there and we were like, what do we even give him?
Yeah.
Because she couldn't do it. She was like, I can't do it.
Yeah. Just
so we're on the phone to
shaking.
palliative care,
and they were just like, oh, look, just give him this, he'll be fine. And like you've heard the thing that they could call the death rattle?
Yeah.
Like he had that. Like he literally sounded like there was water all on his like lungs, and
yeah,
you could hear him breathing. And anyway, all of a sudden he just stopped breathing after, we were all sitting there for like an hour and a half. And and that's the first and hopefully the last person I've seen die. You just see them 1 minute they're there, the next minute they exhale and they're gone. And then all of a sudden, the body turns all stiff and rock hard or whatever. There was an instant, which is funny.
I'm not laughing about your dad dying. If for anyone listening, by the way, I'm not laughing at Ross's dad dying. But there was a moment.
So
when your dad died.
Yeah, he was on his bed. We were in his room, big bed.
Everything was very serious up until this point as well.
And his bed was like the bed frame was wood, and there was probably like a good 15 centimeters bit of wood surrounding the bed, the mattress. Anyway, so the people who come in to take a body away, they came in, put him in this bag. And they shifted him like this slight little bit
because he was in the middle of a super king size bed.
Yeah, and so they shifted him this little bit, and then his knee, it must have been his knee, dropped onto, and it was the smallest amount of movement, but it literally sounded like a fucking hammer hit this wood, the bed frame, and it was like
it was so morbid.
Like fucking hell, and the guys just carried him out like nothing had happened, and you're just like hey. It definitely was no, SVU. There was no like Olivia Benson there to comfort you and, be like, oh, this is what happens. This is how it goes.
I remember I was in the next room. Your mum was like, I was at the chair and I could see through the bathroom into the bedroom where they were like putting him in the bag, and your mum was on the other side of the room with your grandmother. And I remember seeing that happen. And I heard it and I was just like, I had to just sit there and just like look at the ground because I was like, I can't fucking laugh.
Yeah.
Because that was like, I was like, it's so morbid.
I think I looked at my brother and laughed.
It's so morbid that it's funny. But I was in a room full of your father's grieving widow and mother in the room. And I'm sitting there and I was just like, fuck.
Yeah, it's an interesting... Seeing that that's different to obviously your dad and how we experienced that. Totally different. Totally different circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
preparing for someone to die and waiting for him to die to, them instantly being gone is totally different.
So we obviously lived in two different countries just before your dad died, really. We got some bad news about your dad. I moved home to be with you and to spend time with your dad because your dad and I were also very close. But how did you sort of balance spending time with your dad, which was what you moved back for to do, and maintaining your personal life with me, work life, everything, when we were apart from each other?
I don't know. It was tough. Definitely very tough. I don't think I ever balanced it very well. Not inside my head anyway. Maybe it felt like it to you and to anyone when I was with. But any time I was with one person, I felt guilty for not being with the other person. Yeah. So when I was with my dad, I felt guilty for not being with you because also you just lost your dad within 12 months, and you were in another country, and we both decided to move over there together. And it was like, well, I've got to go home and be with dad and sort some shit out.
Because you also ended up working with your dad to be close with him as well when he was sick, but he was still sort of like about, and you guys could do stuff together. You were working together on property, flipping properties together, and
look, when he found out that he was very sick, he sold out of the business that he was a part of, which I was also a part of, which also your dad was a part of as well.
Yeah.
We sold franchises for that business, which was an awesome 6-7 years of my life, and your dad was a part of it for about 18 months or so. And yeah, look, when he found out he was very sick, he was like, I'm out, exited the business. And we decided that we wanted to do some stuff together, and renovated some properties, bought some properties. Which was, cool, interesting.
Did you enjoy that time that you guys were spending together? Because I know that
Not really, to be honest, not in that way.
yeah, because I know that it
Like-
was sort of challenging when you were working with your
Yeah,
dad.
when I was selling franchises in that business, I loved it because it was a very clear distinction between what I did and my job and my role and who I worked for. It wasn't a partnership. My dad had a business partner. They had a great business together, great relationship, and I was, I had a job to do. If I did it, great. If I didn't, I was told otherwise. It was very clear.
Yeah.
But then when I went to work with him, it was very different. It still felt like I was there to work for him, whereas we made a very clear decision to do certain things. And yeah, I felt like I just copped that and just accepted it because of his situation. It was like, no, okay, well,
Yeah.
it is what it is. Shit.
So can you actually just describe like the final days that you had with your dad and what they were like? Because he was kind of doing really bad and then he came really good, which
Had a last wind.
we didn't realize that that's called the last wind. It's like that there's an actual medical term for it. But it kind of gave us in that moment so much hope because he was doing so bad. And then there was like 2 days where he was like really good.
There was one full day. It was a Sunday. It was a weekend.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, there was all the family were outside. We're playing pool. We were, yeah. That was a cool weekend. It was like it was the first time that he was out standing up and wasn't always saying, "Oh, I've got to go and lay down and get some sleep or whatever." That was the first time he went and did that, and yeah, I think we all sort of thought, "Oh, this is cool. Maybe things are turning around." But then, yeah, like 2 days later, he was dead.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, look, it was nice. It was really nice because that was like the last, sort of the last moments that like we all got to have with him, and they were nice moments.
What was like? Did you sort of find closure in those sort of like last moments together? Not in the moment knowing that it was your last moments, but do you sort of look back on that and have a bit of closure around your dad's death and that experience?
Yes and no. It was like one book closed and then another one opened straight the fuck after.
Yeah.
And dealing with dad's estate, and it was in a fucking mess, dealing with like legal situations.
Yeah.
There was someone suing him when he died, and when you think, oh, someone's suing you, must have done something wrong. No, not necessarily.
You can sue anyone these days for anything.
And I learnt a lot about estates and a thing called probate. So when someone dies, if I die and let's say I've got $100 in my account, that goes to the executor, so the person who's in charge of reading the will and distributing that. A will can't be distributed for 6 months or until all potential claims are settled on that. So some random person can come along and say, Ross owed me $10. And then the executor needs to figure out whether that person is owed $10 or not and go through that process. That happened with Dad, unfortunately. His business, he had over 2,000 odd franchisees. And let's just say in any business, let's just say even 1% of people are unhappy customers.
Yeah.
1% of 2,000 is still 20 people. So there was a couple of people, which I think there was 3 people in total. It was 3 people in total. 2 people got together, started to sue him before he died, and I had to settle that because he died.
Yeah.
And then we basically settled out of court, which was, looking back, the worst decision to make, because what happened then, another person saw that and thought, oh, well, all I got to do is try this on and then they'll settle as well.
Yeah.
So we're almost left with no choice but to fight it.
Yeah.
not for right or wrong, but for the commercial reasons of if we settle, then another person is going to come up. And my job at that point, I felt, was just to make sure that mum could have a roof over her head and a car, and my little brother could get through the rest of school.
Because they actually tried to put a caveat on the house.
Yeah, yeah.
As well.
Yep.
Your mum's house.
Yep. Well, it wasn't my mum's house because my dad didn't transfer the house. The house was actually fully in my dad's name.
It was a mess.
And so, again, when someone dies, that's an asset of the estate. The estate was being sued.
Yeah.
Mum actually didn't own the house that she was in. You couldn't transfer any assets, couldn't have access to anything. The only way that you can touch money that's in an estate, and this definitely isn't advice, but from what I understood, the only way that you can touch money is to defend or account for what the estate is doing.
Yeah.
Until all such claims are settled. So anyway, settled this court, this lawsuit, small, it was like 70 grand or something.
Yeah.
But it was going to cost 100 grand a court. All these people wanted 70 grand or something. So did that. Next one, someone comes along, knocking on the door for $4.5 million. And it's like, well, okay, I guess we're going to defend this one.
Yeah.
Took it to federal court and won. So highest court in Australia, and we won.
You didn't get a whole lot of money back though, did you?
No, it was a lost exercise. It cost me, well, it pretty much cost me everything that I'd made up until that point personally. And the estate, it drained the estate. But it cost me 2.5 years of my life, and they were probably the 2.5 years of the hardest
I feel like it
years.
took 15 years off of your life.
What are you saying, I look old?
No, I'm just saying you it took a really huge toll on you as a person. It took a huge toll on us.
It did. I remember getting phone calls from lawyers. And this is, my dad's just died 3 months, 6 months or whatever. And I'm trying to deal with, what house is mum going to live in? Is, we could move her to a house. We've got to rent a house and going to sell the car.
She also had no rental history. So we had to figure out.
We had to pay the first year up front.
Yeah.
I wanted her to live a nice lifestyle as well. I didn't want her to go from living in the house that they were in, which they'd built and worked their ass off for, to then, something which was, not as nice. So, all that stuff I wore and, took on, and it fucked me up for sure. I put other people and other things first. And look, I wouldn't change that.
But moving forward, you would if something had happened, you would definitely do things differently.
No, looking back, I wouldn't do things differently the way that I did do them because it's all,
No, but I'm talking about in the future. You would you would
know
how to handle situations.
We don't have any more dads to die, so
it's very true.
It's not like another dad is going to come along, So I don't think but talking to someone if they were going through it, I would share with them a little bit of my experience and maybe how I would have handled it slightly different for them to be able to look at things differently. For sure, because I should have looked after myself and my own head a lot more than what I did. I remember getting phone calls from lawyers and would literally put the phone down and go outside. And fortunately, we lived on acreage, but I would literally scream fuck at the top of my lungs. Because it was just one thing after another, and I was I didn't know how to handle that stuff. And I was 31, 32 or something. And look, I get it. Other people have harder things and terrible shit and whatever. But I just wasn't equipped to deal with that stuff. Hey, I didn't know. But
you were also trying to grieve the loss and death of your own dad.
Yeah. And look, this is another way, even though we're in Australia, working with Albert and we had video calls with him, far out. That guy, I don't want to say saved my life, but fuck, he just helped me go through some stuff. But I think he helped you more, to be honest. I think
he helped me be there for you the best way I possibly could, because there was things that I physically and emotionally couldn't help with. But the way that I was there for you and supported you, he was definitely just so amazing for. Yeah. And helped me navigate, because I remember we were going
because you'd also only just lost your dad again. So it was oh shit.
And it's not like I had and it's not like I had family to talk to for support or you know what I mean? So we were having these calls with Albert, and even the whole thing, our address was posted on the internet by some of these people who were a part of suing your dad, and that was traumatic because people were turning up to our fucking house, and I was then involved when they posted that address online. It's this is Ross's address. He's also his partner is this person, and they would just go into like just basically baiting people to go over to the house and abuse us. And
Yeah.
we had to get all these cameras installed and had crazy security at the house, and it was just fucking traumatic. Like, it was horrible. And watching you go through that was so heartbreaking to me, because there was nothing I could do to help in so many scenarios except for literally just be there with you and support you and try to do what I could to be emotional support to you, and just
Yeah, you were never there to sort of give me the answers. Because even I didn't know the answer. The lawyers didn't know the fucking answers. Well, maybe they did. They just wanted to extract more money. But I think what I found sort of Albert helped you with, because I saw it in how you were with me, was, you know, you let me vent about certain shit and you were just there to support me. It wasn't like I was coming to you and expecting you to come up with an answer.
Yeah.
It was just nice that I just felt supported, and even doing little things like doing my laundry, you know.
Yeah.
You know, having dinner ready when, you know, I would come back from a fucking 6-hour meeting with lawyers or accountants
Trad
or whatever.
wife.
Yeah, well,
I was in my trad wife era then.
what is that?
Traditional wife.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, triad wife? Isn't that like a gang or something?
No.
Are you like
Well, yeah. If you want it to be, baby, I got your back.
But yeah, like those things, they're the things to me that made the difference. Like getting the car cleaned every now and then, like all of a sudden just showing up, the car's clean and you're not saying anything. Those are things that are just like, oh, fuck, like there's someone there with me, and, you know,
Yeah.
she might not need to know everything that's going on, because I didn't want to drag you into knowing any of that shit.
I knew.
All of that shit anyway.
I knew. Like, I was just there to support you and listen to you and be there for you.
Mm.
And we did personally like go through some really challenging experiences, like outside of that.
Oh, look, both of us,
with family and stuff. And it was
Speaking of, what would you say if your dad was here, or if we got to go out, let's say tonight,
go out with our dads.
you got to go out with your dad,
Yeah.
what would you say to him and what would you want to do?
I would tell him that everything would have been okay. Like we could have and would have gotten through it. And the decision that he made was such a permanent decision to what would have been a temporary problem. And I also just like want to make it so clear that I don't hold any resentment towards him for doing what he did. I know some people get really angry at people who end their life. I've never been angry at him. I've actually always just thought, like, I kind of understand it in a lot of ways. Like I get it. I get why. But I just would have wanted him to have known that everything was going to be okay and he was safe, when things would have worked out and we would have figured it all out, and like we had his back, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't the end for him. That could have just been a really big bump in the road, which is what I've learnt with things in my life. It's like, that's what that situation has taught me. But yeah, I would have literally, like, I would just love to give him a hug.
Yeah.
And just tell him that I love him.
There was a video that you posted a little while ago. Yeah, the one I'm talking about with the dog.
All dogs go to heaven.
I feel like your dad knew when he called us the day before, and that was almost his way of saying goodbye. And maybe we can put together a little video, or you can
It is actually the best. That's the best video that I've actually ever seen explain, like, the little girl in me.
And the father he was.
And the father he was. Like,
because he never wanted to burden you with, like, you know, the dog didn't come to the girl and be like, hey, you know what, hey, I'm going, never going to see you again, and, you know, didn't break her heart. He was wearing
the part
so
of the movie
much.
is like the dog's about to die, right? Goes to the little girl, she's lying in bed, he wakes her up, and it's like, she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I've come to say goodbye. And she's like, where are you going? And he's like, oh, you know, I'm going
gonna
away
go
on a little trip.
Mm.
And she's like, oh, I can't even say it. It's actually so sad. But he basically like tells her that, you know, I'm going away, everything's gonna be okay. Like, you'll see me one day, I'll be around. And I was like, fuck, like that's how I feel about when my dad told me. Like when we said goodbye to each other and like we spoke the last time. That's been the best way that it's described how I felt. You know, it's like, it's so sad. But I do feel like he's always around me. Like I feel such a presence around me all the time. But yeah, that was just like, you find little things, like little pieces that make sense of things over the years, where you see stuff and you're like, oh, I could so relate to that. That makes so much sense to me. Like that describes exactly how I fucking feel. But yeah, like that's what like I would want to do and say to him. But like, what if you were to spend time with your dad? How would you, like, what would you want to say, or what would you want to do?
Oh, look, it'd be nice to just have a drink on the beach in Hawaii. Out the front of the Royal Hawaiian, the Pink Hotel. And honestly, not say much.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have much to say. I think what I feel like I would want to say would be a bit of, like, there's still probably some anger with the situation that was left the way that it was. So I don't think I'd want to say much. I just think I'd want to enjoy his company.
Yeah.
With maybe some Pink Floyd in the background.
It'd be so nice to just be able to spend like one last day with them, right?
Well, we're about to sit down with someone who might be able to make that happen. I want to make your dreams come true, baby.
This is our last day with our dads that we get to spend like hanging out with them. This is with David.
Yeah, look, let's get into that. We're filming these 3 episodes back to back. So I think David's just arrived here in the studio, and that's our cue to wrap up.
Yeah.
This episode of this discussion.
Yeah.
Join us in the next one for some interesting shit, maybe.
Yeah, this has been, honestly, this has been like a whole big therapy session.
We're going to be dehydrated.
For me.
It's like a sauna from out, just dripping.
It's actually been such a great experience for me, like being able to tell this story and like share the experiences that I haven't shared. Like a handful of people know the story that we talked about earlier.
I think it'll put a lot of things in a perspective for, especially people who've seen you on social and, you know, seen highs. Yes, you've shared lows, but I mean, yeah.
But there's only so much that I share of the lows, and so much that you can share of the lows on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Well,
thank you for being honest and
it
riding with me on this journey.
It was a very emotional one, but thanks for sitting through with us, guys, and I hope you took something really wonderful away from that.
If you know someone who's going through something similar or about to go through something similar, maybe, you know, their family, friend or whatever has just got some news of you know, something which might be similar to mine or to Ellie's, maybe share this with them.
Yeah.
Comment if, you know, this is similar stuff to what you went through. Do all the things.
And if you do know someone who's like going through that, be there for them, show up. Don't just send a message. Show up, support, give them all the love.
Yeah.
Because that's what people need in times and moments like this, right?
Thank you for listening. Catch you in the next one.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to In Real Life. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe on Spotify and connect with us on Instagram at IRL with us. And remember, life isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's about living it on your terms and meeting your own expectations. So go out there and live in real life. We'll see you next time.